Good morning, and welcome to another inspiring episode of the Good Morning Minute, where we start the day with purpose, passion, and a little bit of power. I'm your host, Angelina Mosica, and today's conversation is part of a special series in partnership with the Empower Her Steps virtual conference, a movement rooted in helping women rise, heal, and walk boldly into the life God has designed for them. Our mission is simple but powerful, empowering life's purpose. Because we believe that when a woman finds clarity in her calling, everything changes for her family, her community, and the generations to come. So friends, grab your coffee, take a deep breath, and get ready to be uplifted as we dive into real stories, honest lessons, and bold steps towards purpose with our incredible guest today. And our guest today is Mandi. Hello, Mandi. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Angelina. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I am feeling today very blessed to be on the Good Morning Minute, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope with you and all your listeners.
Wonderful. Well, we're excited to get into the heart of the conversation. But before I do so, I'd like to just take a moment to allow space for you to kind of introduce yourself and the things that you're doing.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I'd love to introduce myself. I can honestly say today I am a grateful, happy, positive person. Again, my name is Mandi Jones. I am a happy wife of 16 years. I'm married to an amazing husband who's super supportive. I'm a proud mom of a 19-year-old boy who's attending the University of Utah. So we're feeling some distance because I'm here in Texas, which I know you are as well.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. We are currently empty nesters, or as Mel Robbins says, we are bird launchers. Very excited to look at that in a little bit more positive way.
Yeah,
Outside
I
of
love
work,
that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
did too. Right around the time that we launched him, it was a little over a year ago. I listened to that podcast and it was so helpful. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Outside of work, I love riding my bike. I love traveling. I like trying new experiences or working out with my F4 sisters. There's my plug for my F4 group. It's a free women's workout group, um, exploding all over Texas. I
Wonderful.
also am the creator of a podcast similar to yours called the Monomyth Diaries, where we give our guests an opportunity to share their transformative stories and all the gifts
Mm,
and benefits that come out on the other side of it. Never thought
mm.
I'd be doing that at the age of 48. It was a big pivotal change for me. I'm also working on writing a book about my journey in growing up in active alcoholism and my journey
Wow.
through a 12-step program called Al-Anon, which is what I really want to talk about today. So, I really want to spread the message of Al-Anon so that my story can help others find, peace, serenity, and live happy, joyous, and free. That's what I'd really like to do. Yeah. So, thanks
Yeah.
for having me
Well,
again.
yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate just the vulnerability of saying, this is what we're going to talk about. So let's jump into it, Mandi. Let's talk about it. What was the defining moment of challenge in your life, and how did it impact you in developing this group?
Yeah. Well, again, your idea of pain from purpose,
Mm-hmm.
or purpose from pain, I guess. For me, it wasn't this big lightning bolt experience. It's sort of been this slow awakening over many, many, many years. And I, as I said, I grew up in active alcoholism. Both my parents were drinkers. And I think for people who aren't super familiar with what that looks like, it creates a lot of chaos, instability, insecurity, all of those things. And in this 12-step program that I was in, I realized that I was the common denominator in all my problems. I
Mm-hmm.
have the most painful experiences for me probably were my teenage years, maybe my early adulthood, where I was navigating relationships in a very sick way. Again, there was a lot of mixed messages, unpredictability, instability, and it created in me somebody who wanted to be perfect. I wanted to fix and control all of my environment. There was a lot of fear, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
abandonment, a lot of guilt, shame, self-blame, just this sort of an overall feeling of unworthiness. And so there's really for me two defining moments that propel me into being different. And one was in my mid 20s. My mother was sick and dying.
Mm.
She had lung cancer, and I was living in Texas at the time, but I'm from a small town in Ohio. So I'm thrown back into the disease of alcoholism, right? I'm thrown back into that environment. At the same time, I was married to my first husband. Okay. So at the time I'm married, I'm not married to him anymore. But I would have said he was misbehaving, is how I always describe it to people. But really, he was acting out in painful and destructive ways. And I'm not blaming him. I don't want anybody to think that I'm blaming my parents for their drinking. I'm not blaming my ex-husband. But the reality is that I was a sick person and he was a sick person, and we're bringing these two sick people together, right?
Mhm.
And so these two things are happening simultaneously. He's disappearing, he's doing whatever he's doing, and not being present for me while my mom is dying. So I'm trying to grieve my mom and figure out what's going on in my marriage.
Mhm.
And I call a friend of mine. All this is happening, and it finally comes to a head, and I call a good friend of mine. Her name is Diane, and I do have permission to talk about her and her husband. And I call her. She's 20, 30 years older than me. I mean, she could be my mom, right? And he
Mhm.
could be my dad. And I'd known her for about 5 years, and I really admired her. You know, she lived her life with grace and dignity, and she had this great relationship with her husband. I mean, they were just so sweet. And so I call her, and I'm boo-hooing and telling her all of this is happening to me. And she says to me, Mandy, did you ever think that alcohol was your problem?
Mhm.
And of course, I had never had that thought. You know, here I am in my mid 20s, right? Mid to late
Mhm.
20s. And I couldn't really see that. But she proceeds to explain her story to me, right? Which is sort of what you're doing, right? She tells me her intimate story of being married to her husband who had been a drinker, and it devastated their lives, right?
Mhm.
And so she's telling me this, that there's this program called Alcoholics Anonymous for him to stop drinking. And then there's this sister program called Al-Anon. And it's a program designed for people whose lives have been affected by someone else's drinking, right? So she goes through
Mhm.
all this, and I'm like, nah, not my problem. Right? I gotta get a little sicker and have a little bit more pain to really figure out that that's going to be my problem. So about 6 months later, you know, my ex-husband and husband at the time, are trying to work things out, right? And
Mhm.
the cycle starts again. He's disappearing, he's misbehaving, and in January of 2005, I call her back up and say, I want what you have. I want your peace. I want your serenity. How did you get it? And so in January 2005, I start working a 12-step program called Al Anon.
Mhm.
And then the second one, as I told you, there were two really pivotal defining moments. The second one was a year and a half later. I am working a 12-step program. I go every single week. I'm working with a sponsor the same way alcoholics do, right? With their sponsors and 12 steps. It's exactly the same thing, except we're just not the drinker. We just have all the effects of that.
Mhm.
And I find out a year and a half later that my ex-husband is having an affair.
Mhm.
And during that year and a half time, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm learning about looking at myself, my own behaviors, surrounding myself with good people, and I'm starting to see relationships that don't have to be so chaotic and crazy and stressful. You know, I'm starting to see that I want to live life a different way.
Mhm.
And so he's having an affair. I confront him. And when I confront him about this affair that he's having, he strikes me in the face while I'm holding our child. So our son at that point is still a baby. And I realized that day that I don't have to live that way anymore. I get permission finally to leave that relationship. And I tell people all the time, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I can see it like it was yesterday. God did
Mhm.
for me what I couldn't do for myself. I needed out of that relationship. I needed permission to leave that relationship. I need the push, you know, to go, I want to live life differently. And this is not what I want it to look like, right? And so
Mhm.
those were really the two defining things that happened to me. Was a good friend of mine saying, "Hey, there's this program out there," and you know, the kick from my ex-husband to get it started. And I think once again, I want to reiterate that I am not upset with any of the people who were drinkers or addicts or anything in my life because they blessed me, with a different life, and I probably wouldn't
Mhm.
have got there otherwise. So those were the two defining moments.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that part of yourself to the listeners today. It's hard. I mean, there's so much shame and guilt when we are going through things like this. And I know that many of us who have experienced similar situations or, other traumatic situations will look at ourselves in the mirror and go, there can't be anybody else out there that's going through this. It's just me and nobody's going to understand it and those things. I mean, we really try to justify why we remain in a relationship like that. And I like that you point out there's root causes there too, because alcoholism was just a norm for you. You grew up in that environment, you functioned in that environment, you knew what that environment was about. And to step out of it, that's also stepping out of a comfort zone, whether it's toxic or not, it's still a comfort zone. And you're stepping out of it to create something new, peaceful, to allow joy to illuminate in your life and stop the struggle. So I appreciate that. So let's talk, Mandi, a little bit about the 12 steps. So what was the growing? What were the steps?
Oh man, they are the same 12 steps. I remember getting into Al-Anon,
Mm-hmm.
step number one is, came to believe that a power greater myself could restore me to sanity. And I love that you asked that question because that's so important to me because at the time I didn't have a higher power. I had always been looking for external solutions outside of
Mm-hmm.
myself to solve my inner problems. Whether it was drinking, I tried that. I tried drugs. I tried diet. I tried exercise. I tried education, professionalism, men, you name it. I tried it. I had always been looking for something outside of myself and coming up with an idea that there was a higher power that I could surrender to was amazing. So we do work the 12 steps with a sponsor the same way that alcoholics do. And you go on this journey and you really take the time to look at your own personal inventory, is what we call it. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
looking at your patterns, your behaviors, your destructive patterns, as well as your good traits. And sometimes some of my good traits I took to an extreme, like helping people, I don't need to help people. That's not my job, helping in a constructive way, sure. But I really found that I was a manipulative person. I really wanted to control the people around me. If my ex-husband would just behave, then I could be okay. And so working those steps allowed me to see my own patterns, to develop a higher power, to develop my own sense of self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, and a lot of it is through sharing our own personal journeys, as my friend that I told you, Diane, did for me. We do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that. I told you, like, we share our experience, strength, and hope. That's what we do. This is what I've been through. Have you been through it? Just being open and honest and vulnerable. I don't know if that answers your question. Um,
No, yeah, absolutely. Because this is the trend that I'm seeing amongst those that I interview, and I did the inner work. It's like because everything stems from you as your belief systems, and that's one thing that's hard to come across because we get in that victim mindset where it's like it's not me, it's them. The world's against me. Like I'm doing all these nice things, and that's what I appreciate about your story is that you're like, yeah, I was helping, but it wasn't to be helpful. Really, it was so that I could control things. And
so
I
I'd
think,
feel better.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you'd feel better. It's really for you. And then when it isn't reciprocated or you don't get an appreciation or something, then it's like, well, see, I'm worthless. And then you go back and reaffirm all those beliefs that you worked so hard to change about yourself to build that self worth. In your story is what I'm hearing. So I think that's important for listeners to understand. Hurt people like to help people. And sometimes when you don't do the inner work, you don't know how to put boundaries and you can become an enabler for some. And you to get taken advantage because you're just like, oh, I just want to help everybody. And there's nothing wrong with that, but do understand your limits and your boundaries. You can't help everybody. a person has to want to change for themselves. All you can do is provide comfort and resources, I think, in a situation like this, and
And
hold
keep
them
my side of
accountable.
the street clean. Keep my
Yeah.
side of the street clean, model the behavior I want. I like to call it attraction over promotion. It's not my
Mm,
job to promote what I think everybody needs. I just have to live my life and do the next right thing.
absolutely. So, how has completing the 12 steps shaped the person you are today? What was the result after all of it?
Yeah. So working the 12 steps is not a one and done thing, by the way. I think I want to make that clear. When you get into a 12-step program, it's really sort of a lifelong deal. These are issues that I'll work on forever. It also, once I get healthy, need to give back, right? And so I had a sponsor. I also now have sponsees, people that I'm helping. So it's this lifelong cycle. And, I've worked the 12 steps a handful of times throughout my journey. I've been in 20 years now. And for example, right now I'm raising an adult son, and no one ever told me that would be harder than raising a younger child. It is so hard. And
Mm-hmm.
I find myself working through those 12 steps now on him and our relationship so that I could be a little more hands off, and be okay with that and surrendering
Mm-hmm.
him to God, right? Like I did the best I could. He's out of my hands, right? And so this is something we do over and over again. I think one of the biggest things that comes out of working the 12 steps is an awareness, right? It's an
Mm-hmm.
awareness and an accountability. As I said, I'm the common denominator in all my problems. So I have to really work on me. I had to learn to have an attitude of gratitude. It helped me do that. I would get up every day and make a list of all the things I was grateful for because, it's hard to be hateful when you're grateful,
Mm-hmm.
is how I say it. I've learned through the 12 steps how to value everyone. That everybody's on a journey and struggling with stuff. You know, it might look different than mine, but it's a struggle every single day. And I can find value in their journey and give people grace. I have been through a lot and they have too. And I can
Mm-hmm.
remember that. That's some of the beautiful things that I've gotten from it. I've also learned that challenges are an opportunity. All the obstacles, all the struggles that we go through are an opportunity to learn and grow. There's a fabulous woman. Her name is Jamie Kern Lima. I don't know if you know who she is. She was the
Mm-hmm.
founder of It Cosmetics. And she has her own podcast. She's fabulous and written some books. But at one point, she said, setbacks are really step ups for something better, right? And that's how I look at life. All these challenges, I'm going to grow and come out on the other side a better person. And I learned that in the rooms of Al Anon.
Mm-hmm. That's important. I think to understand, in order for something to grow, you really do need to make the space for it. And when you hold on to those things that aren't working for you, that are hurting you, that are taking you down this spiral of cycles and patterns that you don't want to see in for yourself anymore, it's important to learn how to release that so that you can
Yeah.
step into something new. And I appreciate that you're highlighting that. So, what do you tell someone that's stepping into the program for the very first time who is like, you know what, I don't know if this is for me. I don't really understand how I contribute to this situation, that in between. What do you tell that person?
When we have new people, usually we tell them our experience, our strength, and our hope. I
Mm-hmm.
will share my story, my personal story of what I went through, how it's changed my life. And really, at the end of the day, there's only one important piece for being a member of Al Anon, and it's has somebody else's drinking affected you? Is it bothering you? If so, you're in the right place. Because think about it this way. In my family of origin, the people that I was born to, right? I had a mom and a dad. Both were drinkers, by the way. But let's just, for simplicity's sake, say it was my dad. I have my mom, my sister, my brother, and myself. There are four of us, and we're orbiting my dad, right? All of our lives were affected by someone else's drinking. And and it affected me. I took all that into my adulthood, right?
Mhm.
So that's usually what we tell people is, if your life has been affected by someone's drinking, if their drinking bothers you, you're probably in the right place.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard to approach those things when you're so used to an environment like that, like coming from childhood or, and I'm pretty sure as you work with your clients and your sponsees, that you are going to find those patterns somewhere in their lifeline and be able to pick it out for them and go, okay, here it is, and let's start addressing it.
Well,
I
it's
like,
an interesting, I love that you say that. It's interesting when we do it, it's sort of like life coaching, as you said, but we
mhm,
allow them to come to terms with their own process, their
mm,
own behaviors, their own um, experiences. They have to
mhm,
figure that on their own. One of the things that we don't do is ever tell them what they should or shouldn't do or give them advice. We just lead them by example. This has happened to me. This is what my experience was. Can you relate? And most of the time they can. When you're willing to open up and be vulnerable and tell people, some of the things that have been the hardest parts of your life, they're like, "Oh, I'm not alone anymore." And it takes the guilt and the shame and all the things out of it when you can say, this happened to me too.
mm. And there's comfort in that, comfort in the community that you build, especially people that are trying to move in the direction of life that you're moving in. There's support there. And I know that's one big commonality amongst everyone that has stepped on to the podcast to talk about their journey is their resources and community, building that for themselves or finding it if they didn't have it so that they could feel supported and moving in the direction they wanted to in their life. So, Mandy, what does living with purpose look like for you now?
Oh, living with purpose to me now is sharing my journey, speaking my truth openly and vulnerably, just being completely honest with people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the impact that alcoholism has had on my life and so many people, its effects is astronomical. I think there's something like 50 million people who are diagnosed some sort of addict, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. And if you think about the number of people whose lives have been affected otherwise. So today, my purpose, my mission is to let people know that this program is out there. It's a secret. It's fascinating to me that during COVID, when my husband and I were both struggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Struggling personally, struggling in our marriage, struggling professionally, we sought outside help. And the number of counselors who have never heard of Al-Anon was fascinating to me. They'd heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but they didn't know there was a sister program that can help with the effects of it, right? So I really want to break that silence. I found it very, very important to break that silence for me because silence breeds shame, right? I read a quote once that said,
Yeah.
every time a woman says, I've been there too, shame loses its grip on someone else. And that was so meaningful to me that, yes, that's what I want to do. I want people to know it's out there. You don't have to be ashamed of it. And I've been given a gift. I feel blessed that both of my parents are deceased now. I'm remarried to a lovely man, 16 years, who is not an addict. Just want to put that out there. I call him a civilian. He's just a normal person. He's lovely and awesome. And I've been given this gift and this opportunity to talk about it without somebody sitting next to me knowing, oh, she's telling everybody our dirty laundry. Do you see what I'm saying? Because a lot of people can't talk about it because it's a mother, it's a brother, it's a sister, it's a husband. They can't do it. I have a platform where I can do it because there is no active drinking in my life anymore. So I
Mm-hmm.
know it's super cliche to say the truth will set you free, but that's the reality. For me, when I started speaking my truth, because it's only been since 2022 that I finally decided I'm going to break my silence. I was willing to share my story with other program people or people that I was very intimate with, but I didn't share it with the world. And so today, my purpose is that. And, as I said, I have a podcast where I allow people to do exactly what you and I are doing today. We take
Mhm.
them through their journey, whatever that looks like. And then on the other end, what are all the gifts? All the beautiful gifts that you get from all the hard work and all the things that you're doing to work on yourself, right? And
Mhm.
that's a gift to me that I have this podcast and get to write a book and all the things that I'm doing to share that.
Mm. I love it, Mandy. That's so powerful. Um, your testimony is powerful. And so, as we start kind of coming to the closure of our conversation, I do want to ask you a common question I ask many of my other guests, and that's one of legacy and impact. If today were your last day, what would you want to be remembered for?
Oh, I think I want to be remembered for nurturing and supporting the people around me. I really want to help others transform their struggles in active alcoholism, and and break that silence. That's
Mm.
really what I want to do. I want to be able to encourage others to share their story and and give people experience, strength, and hope. I call it borrowing miracles. When I was first in the throes of learning that this was a problem for me, so many people told their story to me openly and honestly, and I had to borrow their miracles and say, if it could happen to you, it can happen to me, right? And
Mm.
so I want to be able to give that to the world and to spread the message that Al-Anon exists. If someone's having a struggle with the effects of alcoholism, somebody else's drinking, I want them to know that it's a free program. They're all over the place. They can look it up online and attend meetings. I mean, they're online, they're in person, they're everywhere. It's incredible. It's an incredible secret.
Mm. I love it. All right. And so, my final question to you, Mandy, is if you could leave maybe a bit of truth or a word of encouragement to someone out there listening who's still trying to figure out their life purpose, what would it be?
Ooh, figuring out their life purpose. That's a hard question because that's been a really hard thing for me. I didn't know what my purpose was for the longest time. I got into Al-Anon, started helping other women in Al-Anon, and then felt like my mission was to raise my son. And then as my son got older, and I started thinking, what is my purpose in life now? And I really didn't know. I would say, listen to your heart, keep doing the work, keep looking at yourself and praying. And that's been a huge part of my life is praying, meditating, talking to God and saying, what am I supposed to do next? For me,
Mm.
that would be reach out to people. And as I said, I don't really give advice, but for me, that's what I do. I do a lot of praying, a lot of meditating, a lot of talking, and surrounding myself with good people that have what I want.
Mm. And that's important. Go, surrender to the Lord because someone that is so used to controlling the elements around her to really let that go and so that your truth can truly set you free, you just kind of give it. And you highlighted something that I want listeners to catch. Your purpose can shift different during the different seasons that you're in. So, you were healing yourself, but then you stepped in to help your son grow him into a young adult. And now you're moving on into a different season of your life. So that's important too. Your purpose can shift depending on where you're at as well in life. So I just
That
wanted
is
to
such
highlight.
That is such a good point, and thanks for validating that for me because for the longest time I was like, well, is that okay that I was just raising my son? That was so important to me to raise him in a nice, healthy environment that I didn't
Mhm.
get. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So Mandy, if someone wanted to connect with you outside of this podcast, where could they do so?
oh, they can reach me at my website. It's monomythdiaries.com. And if they want to listen to similar inspiring stories, they can look me up on Spotify, they can look me up on YouTube or, Apple Podcasts. It's monomythdiaries.com. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Mandy, I want to say thank you for sharing your heart, your story, and your light with us today. Conversations like this remind us that purpose isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, growing through the things that we go through, and trusting that every step matters. Here at the Good Morning Minute and through the Empower Her Steps movement, we believe every woman has a calling worth discovering and a voice worth using. So friends, wherever you are today, remember your purpose is powerful and you're not walking alone. So until next time, keep rising, keep trusting, keep walking boldly into the life God has designed for you. I'm Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, and many blessings.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelina. Appreciate it.